So we find ourselves on the 9th tee at my home course here at the Forest of Arden. And in particular, the 9th tee is my least favourite tee shot. And there's a few factors in that. One is the fact that I like to cut the ball off the tee, especially as my safety type shot.
Yep.
And the trees here on the left-hand side, particularly when the tee's positioned on the left half of the tee, means I can't start the ball left. So I get to the tee and all of a sudden I'm thinking, what am I going to do? And it's already creating thought pattern that I'm not happy with, right? And this is why you're here. So I can look to change, obviously, how I play technically, like try and hit a big draw. But obviously, if I lose the shot right in this particular tee shot, that's also no good. Or I can try and hit a different club, and that helps me draw the ball with more ease, like a 3-wood, for example. Or I can just learn to change something that's going to make me be able to hit more successful tee shots here. So Bevis has joined me today, and Bevis is how would you describe yourself?
Well, it's interesting. I describe myself as a breakthrough coach. So helping golfers break through their limitations to reach high levels of performance and enjoyment, and that's all based around the psychological side. And I can absolutely see why you brought me here. As someone who also likes to hit left to right shape, wind off the left, tight tee shot, so I'm not surprised to be stood here.
Yeah, and the trees are almost too high to be able to go, I'm going to carry it over them and bring it back in. If you hit the ball probably 320, you could do that. But for the length I hit it, which is about 285, I don't know how far you hit it.
Yeah, not as far as that, about 260, 250,
We're not far off the same. It's quite a daunting tee shot, and I think I remember Paul McGinley actually saying when he played here in the British Masters that this was the most daunting tee shot he'd faced on the European Tour. Particularly off this blue tee box. Off the front tee box, the trees actually cut in more, but obviously you can hit an iron shot probably up there more so and still get on the green in 2 if you're long enough. So if you were going to coach me then now, and I've already told you kind of what I'm feeling as I enter this tee, that I'm already thinking, I can't hit my normal tee shot, I can't go to my B tee shot, and I'm already thinking about how do I play this hole? What are you going to tell me?
Well, the first things first, there's a lot of thought. There's a lot of thought going on, and from a psychological perspective, one of the key things, something I talk with Adrian about a lot, and he talks to me a lot about, is commitment to the shot. And what we want to get to is a place of 100% commitment to the shot. And also challenge some of the thinking. Is it true that you can't hit your normal shot? Is that 100% true? Because by the time we get to teeing the ball up, we need to have made a 100% firm decision, whether you're hitting driver with a slight cut, even with the wind, and choosing a line and really committing to it, or whether you're hitting 3-wood and a golfer of your ability, the ability to hit a draw. Not everybody's got that. Not every amateur golfer listening to this will have that. So you've got to know your own ability. For me, I've probably, right now, the way I'm playing, I've probably got to stick to my stock shot and really commit to it. If it was in the middle of summer and when I was playing a bit more, I'd probably hit 3-wood and tried to shape it.
I think situation can change as well. Obviously, if I'm stood in this tee and I'm 2 or 3 shots better than my expected score or handicap score, I could probably then grab a 5-iron or something like that and just put one on the fairway, hit another hybrid of 5-iron just short of the green and chip on and go, okay, if I chip and putt, I'll make par. At worst case, I'll make bogey. I'm taking kind of 6, 7, 8 out of the equation. From a golf coach point of view, which is obviously slightly different to yourself, sort of, I would always want my players to commit and trust and never have any doubt. And if I have one kind of negative thought, try and think of 3 or 4 positive thoughts to try and almost swamp that. And also then try and get really stuck into the process.
Well, I see there's 2 separate things. One is the selection, what we're going to do. And once you've made that choice, it's then fully committed to it. And then there's a next process, which is what then allows you to then execute that skill to the best of your ability. So I see this in 2 stages. One, making a choice on a difficult shot, which is how you're playing, it's contextual, it's what the conditions, it's what's the round going. But once you've made that firm decision, in this case, I'm going to be hitting driver, and choosing a tight down the left and trusting the shape. We'll see how that goes in a moment. But once I've made that decision, it's then, okay, what's the process I'm going to use to get completely comfortable over the ball and get completely comfortable and just execute the skill to the best of my ability.
And if that decision making was wrong, from a mental point of view or performance point of view, would you still encourage me to just try and be 100% trusting in it and committed to it, even if it wasn't the perfect choice?
Well, you've got it. Once you've made a choice, you've got to commit to it.
Okay.
So that's the first thing. Once you've made a choice, you've got to commit to it. And then and it's part of the culture that we try and create with MYP is creating this learning culture so that further down the road, actually you'd learn over time. If you're playing, I know you don't play as often as you'd like.
Yeah.
If you're playing more regularly, you'd learn over time that actually the shot for you is a 3-wood with a slight draw, or actually you can trust that a bit more than you thought starting at on the tree line. So it's that creating that culture of learning, so you don't then beat yourself up about the decision, because when you're a bit conflicted,
Yeah.
then you hit a bad shot, and then
Yeah.
people are in that negative spiral of beating themselves up.
Yeah.
So it's just committing to whatever you decided and committing to learning from it. So it becomes that infinite journey of learning rather than one shot meaning everything.
100% that I would agree with that, is that we can't ever play with any conflict. It's got to very much be a firm, I'm going for this, I'm doing this, and hitting it rather than steering it. Don't try and nurse the wrong shot up there or the poor thinking up there.
Yeah.
It's being that kind of full throttle. I'm going to hit it with my process, my commitment, whatever the shot is, and the stats will kind of tell you if that's right or wrong.
Yeah.
For me, so I would look at it, if this was your home course and you played this hole 10 times, if you're always scoring over 6, we've got to change something.
Yeah.
If you obviously 6 might be a good score if you're a 36 handicapper, but you understand what I'm saying. If the score is not what you want and it's consistently not what you want, you've got to change the thinking or the strategy.
Yes.
Or you got to look at the technical side of it. Why is it breaking down in this scenario?
Well, the nice thing about working on the psychological side is there could be something to work on technically.
Yeah.
There could be something to work on in terms of decision making and
Yeah.
learning from that. But then there's a third area which we'll explore shortly, is actually your process around the ball to get comfortable with whatever you've decided and be able to execute, which is and the nice thing with that is it's not always rocket science. It's just a few tweaks, the little things that most amateur golfers don't know.
Okay, well, let's get stuck into the process. Let's try and nurse me through the process,
Yep.
so I can be braver, more optimistic when I step onto this particular tee for the future rounds.
Perfect.
Okay, then. So I'm going to go for my driver.
Yep.
So what do you want to do? How do you want me to process this then?
Well, first things first. All golfers have a pre-shot routine.
Yep.
Not all amateur golfers know what their pre-shot routine is. You do,
Yeah.
even though it's probably unconscious.
Yep.
So the first thing we're going to do is we're absolutely going to trust your pre-shot routine. But before we do that, you've already said that actually there's almost a bit of a negative state and a lot of thinking that's been going on about this tee shot.
Yep.
And I think a lot of golfers can relate to that. So it's how do we clear our mind in order that when we step into our pre-shot routine, we're emotionally neutral and our blood pressure has dropped, our heart rate has dropped, our cortisol stress hormone has dropped, our DHEA happy hormone's gone up. What can we do on the tee, and especially if we watch, sometimes we might be teeing off last, we might have a good medal round going, and we're watching 3 other people tee off, slicing it, hitting the water. What do we do in that time so that when we step into our pre-shot routine, actually we're in a nice space?
Okay.
Or as good a space as we can be. Don't expect not to feel nervous, but we're just managing our state a little bit.
Okay.
So there's 2 simple things I'm going to suggest you do. One is breathe,
Yep.
which won't surprise you.
Yep.
Most people, when I ask people to breathe and I say take a relaxing breath, they go. And of course, when they do that, they're getting cortisol and stress and adrenaline. It'd be good if you're doing a long jump. But for golf, we want to learn to breathe from the belly. For middle-aged men, we don't like making ourselves look fat. But actually, when we breathe in from the nose, when we push the belly out, and actually a lot of good golfers learn to breathe from the stomach rather than the chest expanding, actually that calms and quietens the mind. And we're going to couple that with a technique called Hakalau. It's a meditative technique where we look above eye line at one spot in the distance.
Okay.
When we're accessing emotions, whether or not we know it, we're looking down. And actually, it's physiologically impossible to access a negative emotion when your eyes are above eye level, fixed on one spot. So that's if you imagine I was hitting first,
Yeah.
I'd have you, as an elite golfer, stood, nice and centered and grounded, eyes fixed on one spot, breathing from the belly, and by the time you've taken a couple of breaths there, all the thoughts about the history on this hole, everything else will have faded.
Yeah. So a story I'll quickly tell you on that. There was an elite player I was coaching years ago, and I got it from a conference that from a psychological point of view, you have to tout chimney pots when you kind of walk around.
Nice.
So I said to her, when you're playing, I want you to look at the tops of the trees and almost look at the trees rather than looking at your feet in the ground when you're walking. Nice. She fell over.
Well, you have to be careful. You have to be careful.
Yeah.
And it's a nice one for the tee.
Yes.
It's a nice one for the tee. And
okay.
It's a surprise sometimes what people are thinking.
Okay, so I'm going to breathe and look higher.
Yep. And pick one spot. So there's a nice spot in the distance, a tree, a leaf. Fix your eyes on one spot and take 3 belly breaths. And what you'll notice as you do that is your peripheral vision will expand and become broader. So I'm just going to leave you to be quiet, to take just a couple of belly breaths, fixing your eyes on one spot. And as soon as you've taken the exhale of that second breath, just go in and execute your normal shot.
Okay. I would normally do a practice swing or so. Would I do that before this or after this?
No. So this first, just to quieten the mind, then do exactly what you would normally do.
All right.
Decent.
Straight up the middle. It was a bit
that,
low in the face, but it was.
You would take that, wouldn't you?
Oh, it's on this hole in particular. Fairway for me is golden. If it's long enough so I can get on in 2 shots, then I'm really happy.
Yeah.
I'd take a scruffy drive, as I would call it, but perfect. And that was just a little low in the face, but very straight.
Yeah. No, that's it. If that's your good bad one, we'd be very happy.
And the first drive of the day, in theory, so I'm very happy with that. Okay. Anything else that you would add to that, or you'd be just?
Well, the only thing I would say, if this was a real life coaching dynamic now, what I would say is I'd leave you for longer. So I would say, obviously, we were talking it through.
Yeah.
And I would just say, just get that little bit. If I'm this way, I'm looking at, just spend a little bit longer
before I step into the shot.
Yeah. And because we were talking and there's dialogue, so I would just normally you wouldn't be talking to anybody, so it's just a bit of quiet mind time.
And probably for the viewers watching, the best time to do that is obviously not being first on the tee.
Yeah.
And try and be back with your bag.
Yeah.
And doing this before you actually get your go, because some of them will feel under pressure to hit their shot because their mates are waiting and trying to give them a bit of a jolly up to get going.
Yeah.
So to try and do as much as they can before it's their turn, and then play with a normal routine when it's their turn.
Absolutely, the normal routine. There's a lot more we could talk about routines, but for now we just want to get people in a neutral emotional state before they enter their pre-shot routine. And if you can do that, obviously there's decision making and then there's what you do in your routine as other things to explore, but that will cut out lots of mental mistakes. I often say it's a mental error. If you're not feeling comfortable at the moment when you take the club back, then it's a mental error.
I tend to look at, if you can hit one shot that you're happy with and you don't repeat it, it's normally environment or mental that causes the next issues. And that's me as a swing coach saying that, where I want you to be technically as good as you can. And how I look at it is, if we can get you technically better, then you can get away with being not as good mentally.
Yeah, for sure.
But if you're mentally good with a poor technique, you can kind of mask a lot of stuff that we don't want.
Yeah, and you think obviously the ideal is, I have lessons every month. I love my golf. I have golf lessons every month, but also if we can marry up the mental and the technical, then it's the enjoyment factor for me.
Yeah.
Really enjoying the experience a little bit more rather than getting that negative cycle of poor decision, feeling uncomfortable over the ball, then beating yourselves up, which is the negative spiral we don't want.
Okay, great. So if you're interested in finding out more about, let's call it the performance and maximising your potential and the mindset coaching, Bevis has got some online videos on MYP. I'll put some links down below and you can find them there and check them out and see if you want to do some online learning to help your mental and mind performance on the golf course to lower your scores.
Thanks, Alistair.
Okay.